You ever feel like there's so much pressure in this life that you're just sort of surrounded on all sides and not really sure what to do next? We're going to think about that today on Now What Devotions from Trinity Lutheran and Cyrus. You know, it's a funny thing when you walk through a field of corn. If you go with the row, it's really no problem. If you go across to it, it's pretty difficult to move, you know. I was thinking about that today. We're in a Bible text this week. We continue in the book of Matthew. It's one of Jesus's major discourses in the book of Matthew, chapter 18. And it seems like Jesus wants deeply. He wants a community that is forgiving and compassionate, but in which there is also justice. And that's a tricky balance. Sometimes in this life, we feel like there's pressure on all sides, like we've got to do everything right all the time. And it's like trying to shove your way through a tight cornfield, you know, until as you push your way through, sometimes you might, oh, look at that, come out on the edge of things, right? Jesus today, he tells a story about a king, a powerful fellow who, one of his servants has run up a powerful debt, a huge debt. And the servant is about to have himself and his kids and his wife and everything he has sold to cover the debt. But the king has it's this word again that we've had before, a Greek word, it's spalako. The guy is moved in his guts, way down deep. He has compassion. And so he has compassion on this fellow and he forgives him his debt. Well, the man walks out and in the hallway on the way out, he grabs another servant who owes him like $5-10 and is like, you better pay up now. And the injustice of that frustrates the other servant so much that they go back to the king and say, hold on, this is what just happened. And the king says, you wicked, wicked servant. This is a story about what it means to live in the tension between compassion and forgiveness and justice. And it's not so simple to just say always forgive, because we do need to always forgive. But our always forgiveness is not because we look at a person and we say, oh, well, what you did didn't matter. That's not the case. We look at the person and say, you are valuable because God made you, right? Another text we have this week is the story of Joseph and his brothers who betrayed him and sold him into slavery, and through a series of hijinks, eventually, after some years, he becomes a leader in Egypt. And Joseph doesn't actually directly forgive his brothers, but he does point out to them, he says, God took what you did and made it good. And I recognize now that you are as much children of God as I am. So there's nothing between us anymore. It's funny, too, how sometimes we have clarity as we leave the pressure and the bindingness of being stuck in the middle of a field, right? I know that many times in my life, either when I have been sinned against terribly or I have sinned against another terribly, I was in a bad place. I felt pressured. And I have had that experience, too, with folks who they did something awful. And I look back at it now and I see there were a lot of reasons. And even if they were foolish reasons, for that person, those reasons were real. When I forgive now, or when I look at forgiveness, I try to think about two things. We're going to talk about this on Sunday more, but I try to keep in mind the identity of the person and the amount of time forgiveness takes. And the first thing I would say about that is when it comes to identity, these are God's children. These are people God loves. When someone sins against me, I tend to limit them down and say, no, all you are is the thing you did to me. You are this bad person. They're not a straight arrow. They're not trustworthy. Like, we have all these labels for it, right? But somebody did something, you didn't like it, it hurts you, and now you don't trust them. And you put that on top of them as their whole identity. But the reality is that they are on a level playing field with you and all other humanity. And God has said they're worthwhile and valuable. It's no effort for me to forgive another chosen child of God. God says, do this, so I do. It's different when I say, well, they're a sinful, terrible person, when I make them something they aren't. But the other thing I'd say about that is the amount of time we forgive. It's not a one-time deal. You don't just forgive and feel better. That's not how it works. It's a spiritual discipline. You continue repeatedly to live a life that is forgiving, not just you forgive when one sin occurs. It's a different thing. We're going to think about that more, but this week, what do you think? How do you live in the tension between compassion, mercy, but justice too? It's a fine balance. I'm Pastor Chris, just exiting the cornfield for now at Devotions, Trinity Lutheran and Cyrus. Bye-bye.